On January 16th of this year, IGN released the announcement trailer for a new indie horror survival game called Zoochosis. The trailer has since racked up over 1.2 million views over the last 9 months and has gotten the attention of horror gamers around the world. PC Games N likened it to Resident Evil meets Planet Zoo. Dread Central described it as The Thing meets a zoo. Pretty much everyone who saw it said, wow, that's definitely something scary and also a zoo. Now, like many others, I also had been eyeballing this since January. I was waiting with bated breath for the development, and so it was a lovely surprise on September 23rd when I got the notification in my inbox that it had released just in time for spooky season. So I added it to my cart and went about my day. It wasn't until I got home later and went to send my friend a link to the game that I noticed oh no. Now, I don't typically let Steam reviews dictate my enjoyment of a game. There are plenty of games I continue to love with my whole ass that are just, the public thinks are absolute trash. But when most of the reviews on the first day are saying the game is sloppy and buggy and unfinished, This is a hilarious mechanic for them to. What was that?
And maybe this is.
Where's...
There's no war. Where did he put that? Where did he put the gas can?
I start to get war flashbacks. I really tried to give this game a fair shot, but I will say, first impressions were. What? No. You're fucking me! That was one of the endings. Not great. So here we are, back again, the angry video game Bree. So buckle in, let's get you in the loop. What is zoochosis? So to start out, I didn't know that zoochosis was an actual thing. Like, it's not just a made-up video game disease, it is a real disease that animals can develop in captivity. It can manifest in monotonous, repetitive actions such as bobbing, pacing, rocking, over-grooming, and even self-mutilation. It occurs exclusively in animals living in captivity and is often the result of poor husbandry and lack of stimulation. I'm not going to show you real videos of this because it is really depressing, but you've probably been to a zoo and you've most likely seen a lackluster elephant or two, so you get the idea. So zoochosis itself is a real, incredibly depressing mental illness among actual animals, but in the game, the disease is something entirely different. We'll get to that. Players assume the role of Paul Connolly, the newly hired zookeeper who takes a job at Pine Valley Zoo in a desperate attempt to support his wife and daughter. As you can imagine, the working conditions are less than stellar. His employer, cryptic Colonel Sanders here, wastes no time injecting him with a mysterious substance after he signs the world's most legally binding NDA. But Paul is unflappable, and he continues on to just learn the rules of the road: feeding, cleaning, checking temperatures, taking blood, and whatever this is. What is this doing? It's explained that the animals here often become sick, and it is Paul's job to keep them from transforming. Paul, again, is not asking as many questions as I think he should be, but we're gonna forgive him because he is desperate. After the tutorial ends, the player can then pick which animal they'd like to care for next. I actually think the developers put a ton of care and thought into this part of the game, but we are going to talk about why it was probably their downfall in just a minute. Players have a set number of tasks to complete in each enclosure in order to correctly diagnose and cure any sick animals. Prepare the correct food by estimating weight, take temperatures, analyze fecal and blood samples, and again with this thing. After identifying which animals are sick, you compare their results to a whole list of potential diagnoses and pick the correct treatment to shoot them with. But of course, this is a horror game, so you have to manage your zookeeper duties on top of whatever the heck this thing is. Players have different options for dealing with mutations, only one of which worked for me, which was to shoot them with a lethal injection 3 times. I have heard and read there are many other ways to deal with these things. Supposedly you can feed them a specific type of meat. I tried that, it didn't work for me. I was probably doing it wrong. It probably has nothing to do with the game itself. Just want to put that out there. I only dealt with them one singular way. After you finish your first enclosure, the game starts progressing pretty quickly. almost too quickly. You return to the hub to find that the meat you may or may not have stolen to feed your family, which is a choice the player can make, is actually human meat. And the first body that rolls through is not quite dead yet. Players can choose to either save or grind up this woman, which is one of several choices you can make that will affect the ending. This woman, Sarah, is apparently an investigative journalist, and definitely not Kristen Stewart, who's been trying to uncover the apparent experimentation that's been going on in the zoo. She doesn't reveal too much about her backstory, other than she knows there's a lab somewhere behind this door she's trying to get at, and she wants your help to access it. She also reveals that you've been injected with a parasite, and if you don't find a cure, you'll transform just like the zoo animals. And at this point, you'd probably love to stick around, search for clues, get more dialogue, figure out the plot of this game, but unfortunately, you still have zoo animals to take care of, and you can't progress the game without doing so. A predictable pattern emerges of leaving the hub to do your zookeeper duties and then returning to progress the main storyline. You need to complete 3 enclosures before you progress enough to activate an ending. There are a variety of paths you can take to get to the ending, and you really are meant to play this game over and over again so that you can adjust your choices based on the consequences and get what you perceive as the good ending. And there is a good ending. Once you get a feel for the gameplay, each subsequent playthrough is about 30 to 45 minutes. That is, unless you get dumb, stupid, bad animal RNG. Pepper, 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 pepper! Pepper! We'll get to it. So that is basically the gameplay in a nutshell. You complete task-driven objectives to progress the story, and you get to one of the various endings. So what's the problem? A lot. But let's start by giving credit where credit is due. I think this game was ambitious, and in fact, I think it was probably too ambitious. It had many different endings, with little choices you make along the way throughout the entire game affecting the ending that you get. While most of the endings had the same general outcome, there were little added things here and there that kept the player learning how to adjust for the optimal ending. And that's really cool. Part of my gripe with Stray Souls was that it gave you the illusion of choice, but the ending you get doesn't actually matter. Zoochosis has a lot of branching paths. That's cool, right? Right? Unfortunately, every single ending felt so rushed and abrupt. Nothing ever felt resolved, and every ending I got just left me confused. I only played through 3 different endings before I just could not be bothered to go through the monotony of picking up one more penguin shit, but I did watch someone else play through the rest, and they left a lot to be desired. The story as a whole didn't make a ton of sense. It was rushed and stilted, and there was very little to explore in the environment that would actually help guide the player through the story. Almost every ending had a blurb at the end that needed to explain how the story actually resolved, which, if you've got good environmental storytelling and good dialogue, you shouldn't really need. I can absolutely admire the developers for wanting to give people an experience where they get to piece together the true ending as you play more and more of the game. But even so, you kind of have to give casual players just like one sort of satisfying ending to really wrap things up, or else they're gonna leave feeling confused and cheated, which a lot of people did. Not everybody is going to want to trudge through the transactional part of this game, which is 70% of the game. It's taking care of the animals. And they don't want to do that 8 times just to get answers to the plot. And there are absolutely ways to stay true to that multiple ending playstyle without alienating casual players. Very recently, I played through Who's Lila, which is a phenomenal psychological horror game. It has 15-ish different endings, with each ending giving more information about the plot. While the game is meant to be played multiple times, the first technical roll credits ending that I got was still satisfying, and I could have stopped playing there. But I kept playing because there was enough variation in each playthrough that it made it worth my time. Zoochosis unfortunately didn't have that same payoff, which is due to the repetitive nature of the game itself, and that brings me to my next point. Let's again give some credit here. Clapperheads clearly tried to make this game replayable with a few RNG elements like what animals you care for, what diseases you're curing, etc. That's super cool. It has almost a Phasmophobia type vibe where you need to rule out which animals have different symptoms, and those symptom combinations cure different diseases. It was super neat. I loved it. At first. Walk with me. Here's the thing, this game has a pretty unique concept. In fact, the only other games that pop up when you Google zoo horror game are these two incredibly just like cursed looking mobile games, and I will not be diving any deeper into those, thank you. And there may be others out there that just aren't being captured by the Google search, but as far as that's concerned, Zoochosis has the market cornered. The problem with having such a unique concept is you need to know what the main pull of your game is. Who are you marketing this to? Based on everything shown in the trailers, this is meant to be a horror game. You are attracting horror gamers. So the horror, the tense atmosphere, the feeling like anything could happen at any time needs to be spot on. Unfortunately, the horror element of Zoochosis wore off so quickly because everything was so formulaic. In the trailer of the game, it felt like animals could turn at any minute and would be lurking around any corner of the building. In reality, the mutated creatures only appear in their enclosures when you're just about 75% of the way through your tasks. There's almost no element of surprise because each encounter is going to be near identical. So if you've taken the element of surprise and the horror out of your horror game that's marketed to horror enthusiasts, you now have those enthusiasts playing Zoo Tycoon. And they're supposed to play Zoo Tycoon multiple times in a row to get a satisfying ending. Do you see how that doesn't really make sense? And I don't mean to keep like comparing it to other games, but making a horror game with repetitive, objective-driven tasks is completely possible. The Mortuary Assistant is one of the scariest indie horror games I have ever played, and it has this exact concept in place. You complete the same tasks on each body in order to progress the story, but it's balanced by unpredictability. There are a whole slew of different scary encounters which keep the player on edge and engaged. That's, as the kids say, aura. Every day I age 10 years. I feel like Clapperhead spent so much time developing and finessing the zookeeper part of the game that they let the story part of the game go. And as ambitious as it was, they may have been better off if they just stuck to one style. Either create a repetitive task-driven game like Phasmophobia, Mortuary Assistant, and focus on creating variations in the horror, or make a linear narrative-driven horror game that has branching paths and doesn't feel like such a chore to play. Now, as I was scrolling through some YouTube comments, I noticed that some people were saying that it looked like the screenwriter had passed during development, which is awful, and I send my condolences to the team at Clapperheads. Losing a colleague and likely a friend that you've been working every day on a project with is absolutely horrible. And maybe that's the reason that the story in this game feels so rushed and unfinished. However, I have a really hard time thinking that the team didn't already have a shared experience and storyline in mind through the entire process. Like, it's really hard to execute something like this without everyone being on the same page for a long time. And I think at that point, it's okay to take a break and pause development to get your bearings. And I know that's easy for me to say as someone who doesn't develop games and doesn't have to worry about release dates and a dwindling budget. I don't know, it just feels like it would have been better to keep this in the oven a little bit longer than to try to meet a specific release date when you know you had so many eyes on this thing. A lot of people have been pretty harsh on this game, and I can absolutely agree with the criticism that it feels unfinished. It needed more attention to detail, way more playtesting, just more thought in general, but I don't find myself agreeing with the criticism that this was some sort of money grab. I do think there was genuine effort to make this game fun and engaging and scary. And there were definitely times where I was having fun and I was engaged, and I think I got scared like 2 times. The fuck? I just think the execution fell flat, and the game that was delivered is not the game that was promised. And like, massive kudos to the people that were cutting the trailers for this game, but I think, unfortunately, it overpromised quite a bit. I know I've really gone in on different horror games for being buggy and unfinished and just generally bad, but with all the patches I see coming out and all the effort I feel like Clapperheads has put in post-release, I have a hard time not thinking that they're trying their best. I want to believe this was made with good intentions and it just missed the mark. It looks like this might have been their first paid game. I think the other couple that have been out are the Sparky Mark games, and those have been free. So I don't know, there's a layer of like extra pressure when people's money is involved, so that's not great. I really do wish them the best. I hope that things get better for future releases. I don't know. Game development's hard, man. I feel like I could have been way meaner, you know? Maybe my little Grinch heart has grown 3 sizes today. Won't last though, because there are always going to be bad horror games. and I'm always gonna play him. So that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see my playthrough of Zoochosis, it's over on my second channel, Breezeby2. I'll link that in the description. But if not, baby, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.